buying the farmer and they're not necessarily buying the food, because they learn to trust and respect you. And it's kind of the same way as you wouldn't go to a doctor and have him operate on you or be your family doctor if you didn't have a significant level of trust. And that is established over time by coming through on your promises. And it is actually a good idea to under-promise, over-deliver. That way, if things don't work out, you're okay because you can still give what you said. And if you end up having more, people are like, wow, this is amazing. I wasn't even expecting this. And then they're like extremely happy. Logo design has been important for us, and we are actually in the process of designing a new logo currently for our baskets, because the initial branding was because of the garlic cash crop that we do. We grow a lot of garlic on the farm because that is a way for us to make money apart from the farmers markets and the CSA baskets, because garlic is worth a lot of money. It's worth a lot of money and you don't need to sell it very quickly because it's got a good storage life. Having something like lettuce, for instance, as a cash crop could work, and there are people who do it. However, lettuce does not have the same kind of storage life as garlic or potatoes or cabbage. So if you're going to be doing cash cropping, I would recommend having something that isn't just going to go bad, and it'll give you a good time window to actually be able to find buyers. By actually having the conversation with your potential customers and your customers, you will get a much better idea of their tastes, their likes, dislikes. And, you know, we did like cold calling in the first year. I would just like show up at a restaurant with baskets of vegetables and be like, hey, chef so-and-so, would you like to buy our vegetables? And, you know, it did end up working out for me. However, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. If you're able to ahead of time go and talk to these people before you even purchase land, let's say if you were selling to restaurants, or to just start conversations with people that live close to the piece of land that you're looking at, and determine, you know, can I sell enough to make this work? And, you know, what do I actually need to grow? As well, I would say that for vegetables, this is not what I did, but this would have been a lot better than what I did. I went straight into production and I had to work elsewhere. But if you can make it happen that you can buy the farm, work off the farm for the first year, just open your fields, get some silage tarps down, put them down for like at least a year if you can. And then when you start production, the weed pressure is significantly less. You'll have a much better time. Whereas if you just go into full-on production in a field full of weeds, every time you till, you're going to be bringing up the seed bank, and putting down a silage tarp for a couple months is nowhere near as effective as it would be for 6 months to 12 months. Especially we struggle with quackgrass, and it just keeps on coming back and coming back. That's why they call it the zombie grass. So it's not just about what your product being high quality. The other thing is that you want to be providing value. So for instance, with our basket program, we make sure that we do a weekly newsletter. We include recipes that teaches people how to grow with what we're providing. And as well, we do a lot on social media to just educate people about what we're doing. And the more I can teach people how to do gardening on their own or cooking, all of a sudden, being a basket member is a lot more profitable in their minds. It's like a win because, okay, I'm not only getting like X dollars of vegetables, but I'm actually going to get recipes that I can cook for my family, and so on and so forth. Word of mouth works, business cards as well. Something that we're going to try this year, which we haven't done in the past, is drop noting. So creating like a marketing flyer where we basically pick places around our different drop-offs. So like if we have one drop-off in Westgate, we'd look like a certain area around that place and just go and put these in people's mailboxes. You don't want to be knocking on people's doors because no one likes to be disturbed when they're spending time with their family. If you could find a way to have it sent to the public mailbox, that is also a good way to do it. I recently received a marketing for another food company that does sell something similar to a food basket, although it's like not something they grow themselves. They buy in products, and they created a similar model doing that. However, I just got that in my mailbox, and there's basically a rule, and it's not hard and fast, but basically, let's say you need 20 people to sign up as clients. You're basically going to get like a 1 to 2% return on doing something like that. So let's say you drop note 2,000 people, then you might get 20 to 40, depending on how well you're doing it. So the more different activities that your farm does, the less time there is to master the primary activity. And that was like a big mistake that I made in the first year. And in the second year, it was like, I should have just focused solely on growing the organic vegetables. However, I was like, oh, I want to grow blueberries and have fruit trees. And then we had pigs, and then I had some chickens, and having to run around and do all these different things, wearing all these different hats was a pretty good recipe for burnout. So I would recommend picking one type of production, getting it mastered for how long it takes you to do that. And then you can add on another production, and hopefully it would be one that is going to be complementary. Something that, like if you're growing vegetables, you could have honey. If you're having livestock and you have all this extra manure, well, then you can do some cash cropping or some vegetables because you have all this free fertilizer. So just something that's going to work well together. I think that it's also important not to just do what you feel like doing, what's going to be fun, but to do what's actually going to bring the farm money. So for instance, like having livestock on the farm, for me, I had a very difficult time to actually sell that, to sell meat. And, I enjoyed taking care of the animals. However, it was basically just costing me money, and I was paying to work. And this can happen in any different type of production. So just make sure that what you're doing is actually going to bring dollars back to the farm for your time and your investments. It is a good idea to establish perennials early. So for instance, we waited till this year to plant asparagus. They're good for 20 years, but it takes 2 to 3 years before you can do your first harvest. So next year we won't have a harvest. We could, I guess, theoretically, but I think we'll wait at least 1 more year. And so that would have been a good thing to get planted in year 1. However, I just didn't have the budget to do that. I got a discount from another farm because they had purchased wholesale too much, and I was able to buy at that same price a smaller quantity. Okay. So I actually only had 1 year of experience working on a CSA basket farm. However, I had another 2 years working on a large-scale organic production. And they used to do CSA baskets, however, so I did learn about growing different crops. However, I didn't learn anything about growing the baskets, and I think it would have been good to actually spend a little bit more time working in the same kind of operation as I wanted to be doing, so that I'd have a good idea of everything that's involved instead of having to figure out a lot of things on my own. Reading books by people who have already spent 10 or 20 years doing the thing that you want to be doing is a great way to accelerate your learning curve, because you can learn from their mistakes the way that I'm hoping you're able to do from our conversation today. I was lucky enough to find a job managing just grow and produce what you like, which is what I did. It's not really very functional, whereas by doing the process of running the farm, by going to farmers markets, by asking my CSA basket members how they found the experience, what things did they like, what things did they want to be better, I got a lot better idea of the things that people wanted to eat and things that people thought were like too much. Like I was giving too many radishes, too much kale, because these were easy things to do. However, people don't want to eat radishes and kale every single week. And you can find out that people don't mind to get carrots every single week because they just love carrots. Or, there's certain crops like that, like cherry tomatoes. No one is ever going to complain that you've given too many cherry tomatoes. So it was always better to prevent issues from happening than to try and solve them afterwards, because once you have created an issue, it's a lot more difficult to solve it afterwards. So for instance, in my first year, I was very anxious to get the fields opened, and I tilled some wet soil and I created a lot of compaction. And it's basically taken 3 years for that field to come back into full working order. So another good tip is to always just like have extras of things that you're going to be using on a daily basis. So, shear pins, they break, drip connectors, drip valves, all the kind of things that that you're going to use on a regular basis, to have enough so that you don't have to like run to the store in the middle of a busy season just to go and get more. And so for pest management on our farm, we don't spray any pesticides. We use largely row covers to keep a physical barrier away from the crops, and crop rotation is really important for that. And it's not that we don't have losses when we do this. However, I have found that it is functional for what I am doing and that it does work for me. So it's always a good idea to have your fields as close to things like your wash station, your fridge or freezer, any kind of like equipment storage. If you can have tools that you use regularly actually stored close to the field with some kind of a shelter that's going to protect it from the rain, even better, because the more time that you spend running back and forth, that's time that could be used for doing other things. And just aren't enough hours in the day for farming. Waste is really a big problem because, like I said, it's wasted time and resources. However, I also do strongly believe that if you're going to be producing food, even if you end up not being able to sell it, it is a responsibility to make sure that someone ends up eating it. So what we do is every week we donate weekly baskets to the food banks in Montreal. And by doing that, I've basically been able to avoid most of the waste on the farm. And if there's something that's really, really just not good for eating anymore, then it will go into the compost. And having your own compost is a very good way of creating sustainability. Theoretically, in a year or two, maybe even less, if it's well managed, you could have finished compost. However, for me, it's actually taken a full 4 seasons, and I only finally have finished compost that I made myself now. And this year is the first year that we've actually been able to afford to have compost brought onto the farm. And we were able to do that through a financing with the MAPAC. Standardized procedures are good because they're always going to be the same. However, when you need to teach employees, it's a lot easier. Whereas if like one person on the farm does things one way and another person on the farm does things another way, because that's just their preference, it's a lot more difficult to teach an employee what they're supposed to do. And, if you've got like one person telling them do it this way and then the other one's like, no, do it my way, do it differently, it's really quite confusing. So having labels being the same, having procedures being the same, like how you're seeding, how you're planting, how you're harvesting, and that way you always know what to do, and it's going to be easier for staff to learn as well. I have learned that planning out a little checklist of what I'm supposed to do tomorrow saves a lot of time, because if you wake up in the morning, you're having breakfast, and then you're like, okay, like what needs to get done today? That's actually a lot of time wasted. Whereas in the evening after the workday is done, you do have a little bit of downtime, which you can use to create the plan for the next day. The only thing is that if you make like a plan for the month or for the whole season and you've got like this huge list, it can become really intimidating, and that can also basically just like give you analysis paralysis, and you're like, I have too many things to do. Whereas if you have like a very clear, achievable list of things that you want to do, it's going to be a lot easier to just check one off the list. That's going to feel good. Check another one off the list. You see the list getting smaller. Whereas if the list is just like unconquerable, that's been a problem for me, I would say. First aid kits everywhere. That's like crucial, because like if you're in the backfield, you cut your finger, you're bleeding all over the place. You got to like run back to the farmhouse, patch yourself up, go back. That's like a lot of time wasted, gas wasted. If you've just got a first aid in all the tractors, all the farm vehicles, that means that no matter what, if something happens, you're able to just patch yourself up, keep going, not have to interrupt your workday. Same thing with having a water bottle on a carabiner. is that you're able to drink throughout the day without like having to like go back to the start of the row, have a little drink, come back. It's just like a big waste of time. Things like harvesting at the back of the row, so that when you get to the front of the row and the bin is heavy, you have to walk less distance. Whereas if you start from the beginning and you end up at the far end and now your bin is heavy, you've got to like walk all that extra distance holding a significant weight. Another issue that I've had, and I feel like this is like a very big farmer trap, is just working pretty much nonstop. And although, you know, there's a lot of work required to do what we do, I think that taking a break or doing something for yourself that you just enjoy that's not necessarily farming once in a while, it's a really good way to charge the batteries. And when you go back to doing your farming, you'll actually be a lot more productive because you won't just be like running on burnout and just burning engine oil. So for the plan, I think it's good to have a field map. However, you know, like you can basically label off, okay, like this is the existing infrastructures, there's a building here, there's a fence there. And then like before you even purchase the land or even get there, you can say, okay, if I need to put a greenhouse or a nursery, where's that going to go? If I need a wash station, where's that going to go? Does this have enough room for all of the different infrastructure that I'm going to need? And having a fieldwork calendar is a good idea. However, it doesn't actually usually play out to the way that we would like it to. But having a rough idea about what's supposed to happen when, especially like for seeding crops, knowing that like if I want to have something ready to harvest on X day, you go backwards with the days to maturity, and then you know when you have to either plant or seed. But if you just kind of willy-nilly seed things as you have time to do it, you might not actually have things ready for when you need it. Having a supply list, the budget. So for the budget, there's going to be probably expenses that you didn't think about. So I would say that it's a good idea to leave a bit of wiggle room so that, you know, oh, I didn't really realize that like I needed X piece of machinery, or I was going to have to buy all these bins and they're actually going to cost like several $100s. Whatever it is, there's probably going to be something that you're going to forget about in the planning phase, and just not having your whole budget spent on the initial plan is a good idea, because then if you do have other things that you need to buy, you will be able to do it. Like I said, the crop rotation is very important. So what we do is we practice a 4-year crop rotation, which means that anything in the same plant family will not be in the same place on the field for at least 4 years, because within the plant family, they're going to share the same diseases, same bugs, and by always moving things around, the diseases and bugs are not able to thrive and multiply. And they're like something that's going to attack an eggplant, like a hornworm, is not going to affect really like your beets, for instance. So the idea is to kind of starve them out, get them confused about where the food source is, and if they have no food source, they can't continue to multiply. The other thing is that creating an ecosystem on the farm for the way that we do it has been really important. So, you know, encouraging different birds. We're going to be actually working with Analytis, and they're going to be installing some windbreaks that are trees that are supposed to attract different birds, like the yellowfinch, for instance, which is good to have on a vegetable production that's going to eat a lot of the bugs that are pests for us, as well as like small falcons. You can also have different plants to attract beneficial insects, which are going to be predators to the pests. And the thing is that when you're determining how much you're going to produce, don't just say, I want to produce a lot because I want to be successful. Think about it and be like, how much money do I need to make this year to make this work? And then when you know how much you need to make, then you can set a sales target, and then from that you can derive a production. But if you go backwards, it doesn't really play out, and you might be making a lot less than you need or that you would be thinking of making. So for marketing and branding, it's really important to differentiate yourself from other farms that are out there, and to think to yourself, what makes our farm special and different, what makes me as a farmer special and different. For us, some of the things are that we are organic and no spray, that it's a small family farm where my dad also went to the FMT program, and just different things like caring about minimizing our environmental impact and not having waste and making sure that any food produced is going to be eaten by someone, even though we do not sell it. And by doing that, you're going to create a demand for yourself and not even necessarily the product, because a lot